You may have heard of calling in or calling out. What is calling up? I'm here with Victor Salmon from victorsalmon.com, and I'm Kathy Martulli from theintimacydojo.com. Victor, can you explain the difference between the three?
Yes. The first time I heard of calling out, I was watching it happen. Somebody was calling someone out for something super racist they had said, and I was like, legit, okay, I can understand what this is. The first time I heard about calling in was actually Black Girl Dangerous's article on calling in. She was talking about a less disposable way to address problematic behavior in our leadership, because often in alternative communities, leadership volunteer an incredible amount of time, or they're really powerful activists, and they're people you don't want to exclude from the community. But when they say really problematic shit, you want to address it, because it can't come from leadership, or it's going to get replicated throughout your movement.
Right.
So, or alternative community, if you're a burner or you're a kinkster, or regardless, whatever kind of alternative community you have.
Right.
So calling up was something I came up with, so I don't even know if it's a thing, but let's make it a thing.
Yeah, no, I agree. I have suspicions of what it means, but I want to hear your definition and share my thoughts.
So for calling up, it's essentially a rallying cry, in my case towards men in my community, to ask more of themselves, to hold themselves to a higher standard. And I think the reason I mentioned that it's towards men is because I feel like a lot of the women in my community have already been called up, and maybe it's something by virtue of being a woman or a minority that you just have to do better to succeed at the same level.
Yeah.
But so I mean, we could say that calling up is calling everyone up. I'm perfectly happy with that. But the notion is essentially calling people to ask more of themselves and to hold themselves to their highest standard, to work really hard on themselves and be their best selves. The reason I use the phrase calling up, to go with calling out and calling in, is because I think it's important people become more aware of the privilege they have, and most importantly, do what they can to be excellent allies.
Yeah, no, I love that. I prefer to call in whenever I can, and I prefer to be called in. Called out can be very, and there are times for it, certainly. I'm not saying people shouldn't. But I find that it seems to create a greater divide, and the person being called out is less likely to actually see the error of their ways and find a path back to the community versus calling in. I do see more and more of that, I think, but I also see where people aren't actually talking to the person they have a problem with. They're getting on social media and talking about. They're not actually ever finding out from the person that they're talking about what their opinion is, what they're actually doing about it. But I really like going, and it doesn't have to be publicly, it can be just like privately going and saying, hey, could you tell us what's going on? We noticed this. And I love that. Like, sometimes I had a friend have a difficult conversation with me. She thought I'd done something that she didn't like sound with something that came out. And I'm like, yeah, I was working with someone new. I'd actually given them different instructions. They did something entirely different. Thank you so much. I agree. There wasn't any actual disagreement there. And sometimes when we call in, we can find out, oh, I just didn't understand the full picture. That makes a lot of sense.
Which absolutely happens.
Yeah, or people do. I misspeak sometimes, and I'm like, I didn't mean to say it that way. It's embarrassing.
But internalized stuff can also manifest. I mean, just because I'm a person of color doesn't mean I don't have internalized racism.
Yeah.
Towards myself or towards others, it happens.
We all are socialized to a certain extent and have our own beliefs that not always are very accurate or helpful. But until we examine them, they don't go away. They're just going to sit there. And I love the idea of calling up where we can say, hey, let's step together. Let's do this together and change these patterns and raise awareness for everybody. I think you're doing that beautifully.
Awesome. So the irony of that was I was about to say the same thing, and I caught myself cutting you off and was like, you're socialized to cut women off, Victor. Don't do it.
No. I haven't noticed being cut off by you, but thank you for that. And we do. I just I work at a corporate job, and we gave a talk on implicit bias in corporate. And they've done studies and shown that women are just as biased as men in a lot of ways against women. And it was I didn't think it'd be that well defined. It was really very similar, and it was okay, where shining that light is not comfortable.
No,
it's
all that. I worked through a lot of racism recently that I held just from my upbringing towards Aboriginal people in Canada, because it's a really awful state of affairs.
Yeah. No, I had no idea how pervasive it was until I started going to ConvergeCon and talking with people, and just like, wow, it's very, it's, and the problem is most of our beliefs are formed by the time we're 5. 80% of our beliefs are formed by our experiences by the time we're 5. We're not, little kids don't have the filters, the experience to go, that's a stupid belief. You know, they don't. They have to go, oh, daddy and mommy say this. This has got to be what's true. I've got to do this thing. And then as we're older, it's when things are embedded, it's kind of like a fish in water. We don't always think to go, is that water good for me to be swimming in?
Oh, that's a great analogy. I like that. Is that water good for me to be swimming in?
Yeah, well, you're welcome to use it if you like it. I think we have to be more conscious, and I love the idea of calling up and inviting people to step up, and the more we talk about it, even if we're getting stuff wrong sometimes.
Yeah. And that gives us the opportunity to be called in.
Yes, definitely.
I think the important thing there is to abandon the idea of being ashamed of ourselves for being essentially who we are, essentially the product of our society and the product of our decisions, which are the product of our society and our upbringing, right? And ultimately, you just have your nature and your nurture that makes up who you are. And you didn't pick your nature, and you certainly didn't pick your nurture. So all the decisions you make are essentially a consequence of not you. So to some extent, we have this illusion of free will, and we should use it the best we can. And at the same time, we can be forgiving of ourselves and be like, yeah, what I did was bad, but that doesn't make me a bad person.
Right.
I can change. Doesn't have to be shame. It can just be a healthy level of guilt. I've said something racist. I feel guilty about that thing, and I'm going to do what I can to right that.
Yeah, no, I love that. And I think it's about consciousness, and it's evolving. Like, I know there's times I've come, like, I learned all this new stuff. I have this down now. And life has a way of humbling me really quickly. Like, partly our understanding is evolving, and we are much more sophisticated now than we were a few years ago. What I thought was the cutting edge at that point was the cutting edge, but not good now. But I think it's all of us doing our best and being conscious and caring that's going to make the difference, not being perfect.
Yeah, and I love Roxane Gay's book, Bad Feminist, where she talks about that, the notion that we've got to stop holding leadership to these impossible standards.
Yeah.
They're just people. It's better to just see everyone as a fallen leader before they become a fallen leader.
Yeah.
And then when something bad happens, hopefully it's not a shock to you. You can hold that duality of, you know, they try and be the best kind of feminist that they can be, and they also fuck up.
Yeah.
And I'm definitely a bad feminist. I'm definitely the kind of person who fucks up.
Yeah, I would never call myself an expert, but I am very curious, and I really appreciate people like you who are, you know, spending all this time and energy gathering information and putting it out there for people to look at and learn from. If you want to learn more about Victor, you can go to his website, victorsalmon.com, and you can also support him on his patreon.com/Victor Salmon. There's some really juicy and wonderful information, well organized there. So thank you so much, Victor.
Thank you, Kathy.
If you have questions or comments, please leave them below.